episode for you today.
We sure do. And we also have an entire treasure trove of diversity, equity, and inclusion centered how-to videos on our YouTube channel.
So you better subscribe already.
Right? In today's episode, we're talking about how to use gender-inclusive language and what more could you ask for?
Yes, and this is actually our third episode in this series. So we have talked previously about inclusive language when it comes to race and with disability.
Wow, and this one really hits home for us sluggers as our entire team. So we have a team of 4 at Conscious Roots. Every single one of us identifies as non-binary, 100%. So hire us already.
Let's first, before we get too deep in it, start with a definition of what it means to be non-binary. So maybe you've heard this term before, but you're not quite clear on what it actually means. So we're going to share a definition from our friends over at transequality.org. So that definition says that a binary, which means one of two things, dictates that a lot of our societies actually only have 2 genders that they subscribe to, meaning that they identify everyone as either fitting into the male box or the female box. Yeah, weird.
No, thank you.
And there are so many people out there who don't fit into that particular binary, which is why they call themselves non-binary.
We have a couple of hot tips for all of you out there to be as loving and inclusive as possible of everybody in your life, including those who do not identify as either male or female. They're instead on that non-binary spectrum. Ooh, yes. So we are going to share that first, gender identity can change over time. I know that probably just blew your mind, right? But it actually can.
Yep.
So you might not always identify as the gender that you were assigned at birth. So you were born, some doctor was like, well, looks like we have a girl, and assigned that to you on your birth certificate. And guess what? You don't have to have that identity your entire life. It might change when you're 10, when you're 20, when you're 30, when you're 80.
Yes.
For me personally, this changed about a year ago when I actually learned what gender identity is, and that there's a thing as there's gender fluidity and there's non-binary, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an NB. And I never even had the language for this, but this is a way that I identified since I was a little kid, for as long as I can remember. And so it really affirmed me to learn about what being non-binary is, to finally have words to put to how I felt my entire life.
And that's so important, y'all, because just as Nady was affirmed, everyone deserves to be affirmed in how they understand themselves and how we understand the world around us.
Right.
So before we go on, we also have to say, being non-binary is not a fad.
No.
It might be some things that you've only heard about recently, or something that maybe we're talking about more and more in the social zeitgeist, as it were, but it definitely isn't brand new. In lots of societies across the world and across eons of time, there has been way more genders than just male or female. So that's something to note. And also, as Nady shared, thank you, about
You're welcome.
their own journey with their understanding of their gender identity, I would say something similar has happened for me. I grew up knowing that I did identify as female, or at least people calling me a woman or saying that I was a girl didn't feel strange or weird or incorrect, but I do know that also the things that make somebody a real woman or a real man, those things we hear about, were never things that seemed to really resonate with me. I always felt kind of left out of what it would mean to be a real woman if I wasn't feminine enough, for example, or what if I felt like being a tomboy was something that was deeply a part of me? Does that mean that I have to identify as male? So me figuring out what gender identity can be, how expansive a spectrum it truly is, actually gave me the freedom to be able to say that, like, yeah, often I identify as a woman, but also, sometimes I don't identify as either male or female, or sometimes I identify as a mix of both, and it's nice to have a language for it.
Yes, and one more thing on that note, thank you for sharing. not all people who identify as non-binary undergo medical procedures to make their bodies more congruent with how their gender identity is. And so some people do that, not everybody, but we also wanted to name that.
And that actually reminds me that something that we all need to know about being non-binary or gender identity in general is that being intersex and being gender non-binary is not at all the same thing. Not even in the same universe.
Thanks. Okay, so hot tips. Tip number 1, never, ever, 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 ever assume pronouns.
Ever.
What?
Oh gosh, they're pausing for the second time and fanning themselves
Right?
off.
So if you are not crystal clear on someone's pronouns, which means they told you what their pronouns are and know that gender identity can change over time, then go with they, them. It's a catch-all for a lot of folks. Just use they, them if you are not entirely sure. For me, sometimes, like today, I present as a femme, them, and I wind up getting the pronouns she, her, hers, which... those aren't the pronouns that I use. I use they, them. And just know that there's a whole spectrum of how people can express their gender, how that looks, and that's different from gender identity.
Exactly. So let's not make assumptions. Let's not see someone in a beautiful, foxy gown and say, oh, you must be a woman. You must use she, her pronouns. That's not at all the same thing. Now, tip 2 is, let's be good friends out there, y'all. If you hear your friends incorrectly using somebody's pronouns, feel free to correct them. That's how we keep everybody on the right path.
Check your friends.
And guys, it doesn't have to be weird or awkward or even mean. It can just be totally normal. Now, you want to see how?
All right. Portia, I just saw Jade's new comic.
Oh, God, I love the work he's doing lately.
Actually, Jade uses they, them pronouns now.
Oh, thank you so much for helping me.
No problem.
How easy was that?
Easy peasy. So now for tip 3, especially for all of you cisgendered folks out there, and when we say cisgendered, we mean that you identify with the same gender that you were assigned at birth. Introduce yourself with your pronouns. As a cisgendered person, that just cuts the awkwardness so much, and it makes it a lot easier for people who do not identify as the gender they were assigned at birth to also share their pronouns and to feel included and loved in the space. It's very, very easy to do. You can create a gender inclusive vibe just like that.
It's so easy. We can practice that too.
Ooh.
Let's see. I'm Portia, and I use she or they pronouns.
It's very nice to meet you, Portia. I am Nady, and I use they, them pronouns.
Oh, thank you so much.
You are welcome. My pleasure.
We are gender non-binary robots at this point.
Yes, thank you.
And like we said, you don't have to make it weird or awkward like we just did. Sometimes it's fun to make it weird. One more thing that we want to share with you out there is something I'm always really excited about. It's the genderbread person.
Ooh, delicious.
Oh, this is a tasty and very interesting diagram that outlines everything you need to know about gender inclusion, gender being a spectrum, not just a binary of 2 choices. So we're going to link that in the notes below.
Ooh, how nice of us. So that is it for this video. We hope that you take everything that you've learned and that you spread it like little tiny seeds so that they germinate all over the world.
Ooh, sounds like conscious roots.
Ooh. Grow with us. Hashtag.
On that note, we are going to be back next week with an episode on creating gender inclusive workplaces.
Ooh.
So you don't want to miss out.
Heck yes. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being you. Remember to hit that subscribe button and also like this video. Share this video broadly on your social media platforms and follow us too. Hello, because we put out more content in this same line on our Instagram and Facebook.
And with even more spice, if you can believe it. So,
right?
Tune in next time. Thank you.
Got to get back to my book.
Ooh.